Welcome to book 3 of our 7-part mini-series on books that have changed our life. If you haven't listened to the first 2, please head back. They're only short episodes, and we'd love to hear what you think and if you've read those books, what you took. So, my turn then. We've had 2 from Ross. Mine, it's a little bit of a cheat, really, because I'm only halfway through the book, but I have been quite tentative with who I've told about this book because it feels so precious to me. And normally I'm quite loud about books that I'm reading and enjoying and taking a lot from, because I just want to share it with everybody. And if I've had a nice experience, I want everybody to know about it. But this one feels very different. So I've been really almost keeping it back for myself like a greedy little girl. So this is called The Book of Joy, and it's been written for the Dalai Lama and Desmond Tutu, Archbishop Desmond Tutu. And the bloke that's written it is called some Abrahams. I'll get it in a minute. And basically the 2 gents, the Dalai Lama and Desmond Tutu, turned 80 and they got together for a week to talk about joy and their life. And it's really amazing. Now, we were recommended this when we were in Sri Lanka by a lovely girl that we met in our hostel, and she said exactly the same thing to me, that she's reading like a few lines a day because she's really trying to savor it, because there's just something about the book. It's just brilliant.
You sold it.
It really is. I'm trying not to sell it because you either kind of get it and you want to read it or you don't.
Yeah.
So
but that's the same with all books, though, isn't it? Yeah. So many times I get recommended a book and you sort of read it, or you recommend it and someone else reads it and they don't quite take to it. Because I just think with books, it needs to hit you at the right time, doesn't it? Like you need to be in the right mental frame of mind to be ready to absorb that book. And like some books I've read, it's not hit me. And then a couple of years later, I actually revisited and found it amazing. So it's... you need to be in the right time.
The right frame of mind. So they get together, and it's really interesting because obviously they're 2 very religious men, and I'm pretty not religious.
And how old are they?
They're 80. Well, they're a bit older than 80 now, but
okay. But 2
around the
wise
time.
old men.
2 wise old men. The Dalai Lama obviously is a monk, so is within the Buddhism religion, and then Archbishop Desmond Tutu is Christian, and both the gents come from very humbling backgrounds. The Dalai Lama is still in exile, so he was kicked out of Tibet a long time ago and has been living in India ever since as a refugee. So the advice and the not necessarily advice, but the learnings and the words from them both are coming from places of real struggle. It's not people sat on their golden horses, and so it's really, really wonderful. The writer is I had it up, Douglas Abrahams, and he does a fantastic job because he's I don't actually know how old he is, but I imagine he's about a 30, 40-year-old guy. And then he kind of takes some of the lessons from the guys and translates it into kind of the modern day.
Right, yeah.
So
it's, you can apply it.
Yeah, definitely. There might be some really old wisdom words, but the chap kind of translates it into the modern day. So I love it. And I started reading it when we were on our way from Sri Lanka to Krabi in Thailand. So that was about 4 weeks ago, 3 or 4 weeks ago. Yeah, so it's quite recent. Really, really
changed
recent.
Your life.
But I downloaded the sample on my phone, and I've never ever read a book on my phone. I think it's really odd. Ross reads all of his books on his phone, and I've never been able to get to grips with that. But I downloaded the sample because I was so desperate to read it. And we were on a night flight, weren't we? And I got through these first 40 pages and I must have cried out loud, laughed out loud. And it had such an impression on me, probably because I was delirious with sleep deprivation. But I stayed up And as soon as we landed, I downloaded the rest of the book, and it just changes for me, it has, for the time being, completely changed my perspective on happiness and an understanding of what actually makes me joyful. Not happiness, that's the wrong word, because they explain the difference between joy and happiness. Joy is something that is like inherent within you, and happiness is a bit like pleasure, where it comes and goes. And they talk about everything through death, and how our poor world wouldn't be able to cope if we all lived, and it just really breaks down us as a humanity. Nothing is that dramatic really, and you can take the good out of all the bad that comes into your life, and it just is really wonderful. Really, really, really wonderful book. Really great to lift the spirits and help you appreciate what you have, even if you've been through trials. And they talk about, for example, Nelson Mandela, and how when he was put into prison, he was a really angry, I had no idea about this, really angry, really violent man, and his time in prison actually helped him become more compassionate, more understanding, and made him the man that he became. And they talk about how if he didn't have that time locked away, the awful time, then he wouldn't have been who he was. So it's just all about taking the good from the bad, and you kind of have to go through the bad. And it just is really wonderful.
So what have you taken from that then? In what way do you have to go through the bad to get to good?
Because if there is no suffering, then there is no joy, basically. It talks about you can't really appreciate things if you don't have some element of suffering, or it talks about how you need the suffering to be compassionate. And this is a quote that I actually sent to a friend the other day who was struggling a little bit, and it's just a snippet from the book, so it's a little bit out of context, but hopefully you'll understand when I get there. So it reads, "I was quite struck by the Dalai Lama's phrase of passing through difficulties. We often feel that suffering will engulf us, or that the suffering will never end, but if we realize that it too will pass, as the Buddhists say, that it's impermanent, we can survive them more easily, and perhaps appreciate what we have to learn from them and find meaning in them, so that we come out the other side not embittered but ennobled." I think that's a really, really good little part of the book to give you a sense of how they talk. And it's just
nice.
really
Is it
nice.
a religious book?
Not really, because they do mention God and heaven and things like that, and and talk about how good meditating is, and the lifestyles of the men. Like the Dalai Lama gets up at 4 a.m. every morning to meditate, but he goes to bed at 7, and kind of the way that they live their life.
Yeah. Okay.
So it is religious in a sense that they are religious men, but it's not preachy at all.
Yeah.
It's really good for them to both have their different beliefs, because obviously the Christian side of things, I'm actually in the chapter about death at the moment, and he's saying, when I die, I will go to God and I'll be able to meet all of my family that have passed away. But the Dalai Lama believes in reincarnation, so he's trying to live his best as he can to obviously reach the top or come back
so
as a better.
Got those interesting differences.
Yeah, which is nice, because obviously both of the men hold on to their faiths to live not in fear of death, and to be wonderful people, basically.
So who should read this book? Why would someone read this book?
I think everybody should read this book. I feel like I will be gifting this book to all of my friends.
You're right, okay.
Because I don't feel in necessarily need of being told to be more joyful, but it definitely has helped me just look at things a little bit more differently. And I hope, and I think it'll be one of those books that you can dip in and out of and go back to. But I definitely think if you've gone through some hardship, or you're struggling at the moment, if you've been unwell, just to help you move past those times of struggles, or to look back on them and take from them positives, which is very difficult if you're not in the right mindset. But I really think that this book is wonderful.
Yeah, it sounds like, I haven't actually read it, but it sounds like it's quite a holistic view of life and kind of teaching you what brings joy and happiness, as opposed to getting kind of caught up in day-to-day, all of the sort of, meaningless problems and challenges that come up. So, okay, so that was book 3 of the 7 books that changed our lives. Hope you really enjoyed that. I want to read it now.
It's just so good.
Yeah. So, like always, if you haven't listened to the first 2, go back now. They're available to listen. They're also on lifedesigndiaries.com. And get in touch with us. Go on lifedesigndiaries.com, click contact us, and let us know what books you've read that we potentially should be reading. We're always on the hunt for a new book recommendation. So let us know. And have you got something here?
I was just going to finish on one last quote from the book.
Okay.
Lasting happiness cannot be found in the pursuit of any goal or achievement. It does not reside in fortune or fame. It only resides in the human mind and heart, and it is here that we hope you will find it.